Hawaii was a leader among U.S. states for renewable energy, but last month Governor Josh Green abruptly changed course and committed the islands to importing liquid natural gas for electricity. The tentative gas agreement looks like it might solve a short-term cash crunch for Hawaii's electric utilities, but how would gas perform long-term compared to renewable energy? Today, we'll compare them side by side on cost, environmental harm, security, and accountability, not necessarily in that order. And spoiler alert, there's one clear winner. As a special bonus, I dug into state and federal documents to outline a clean energy future for Hawaii. Welcome to Edenicity. Best practices for sustainably abundant cities. Okay, what's driving the gas agreement? Hawaiian Electric Company has fallen behind in its renewable energy goals for Hawaii's most populous island, Oahu, after 2016. According to the state's energy director, Hawaiian Electric Company was capital constrained, especially after its handling of the 2023 Maui wildfires tanked its credit rating. But strangely enough, lots of investment money is available for liquid natural gas as an energy source for electricity. The equipment for this is supposed to be easy to convert someday to burning hydrogen. And hydrogen can be made from water using solar, wind, or other renewable forms of energy. So is hydrogen really the fuel of the future? Is liquid natural gas really the infrastructure to build to get to that fuel? Well, let's start by looking at them in terms of their effects on the environment. Now, hydrogen is already a well-established energy source for certain industrial applications. But as for fueling the future, I actually first read about it in 1973 when I checked out a book from my elementary school library on futuristic cars. This was the most exciting thing I had read in my life up to that point. I came running home to my parents saying, "Mom, Dad, in the future, cars aren't going to use gasoline anymore. They're going to use hydrogen, which you can make from dissociating water." Well, 52 years later, I'm still waiting for that to happen, and I've decided not to hold my breath for hydrogen. Meanwhile, burning natural gas, otherwise known as methane, chemical formula CH4, does produce less nitrous oxide, sulfur, and soot than burning oil. It also emits 35% less carbon than burning oil. But that tally doesn't include leaks and fuel burned in extraction, processing, and transportation. Now, it's true that leaked methane only lasts 7 to 12 years in the atmosphere versus centuries for carbon dioxide, but methane is 28 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And as you can see, methane is fast accumulating in the atmosphere. There's no two ways about it. Methane, natural gas, is bad for the environment. Now, for some reason, perhaps having to do with the availability of investment monies, the administration has been defending natural gas by comparing it to the alternative. So you see statements like this one from Hawaii's chief energy officer, that we're the most carbon-intensive state in the nation. Now, while petroleum does account for more of our electricity production than it does in any other state, where you see other energy sources like coal, nuclear, and hydro, this can be very misleading. Per person, Hawaii is not the most carbon-intensive state. In fact, it is about the 35th most carbon-intensive state, at 13 tons of carbon per person per year. We produce 89% less carbon than Wyoming and 75% less than West Virginia. By comparison, solar and wind energy produce 0 greenhouse gases. Their manufacture involves 50,000 times less material than the hydraulic fracking that produces most of the natural gas that we use, causing far less physical and chemical damage to the environment. There's also this persistently false rumor that solar panels require more energy to make than they ever produce in their lifetime. That may have been true in the 1960s, in the earliest days of solar power, if then. But today's solar panels and wind generators produce over their lifetimes some 20 to 50 times the energy that it takes to manufacture them, while fracking delivers only 10 to 20 times the energy required to extract it. And this is further decreased by the additional costs of processing and transportation, which can vary wildly. So again, by every measure, solar and wind power are much better for the environment than liquid natural gas. Now let's talk about accountability. Hawaii was doing great on its goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2045. According to some analysts, Hawaii consumes less electricity per person than any other state. And even by the most recent measures by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, we're always in the top 5. We were doing so well, in fact, that in January of this year, 2025, Governor Josh Green moved the deadline for renewables for the outer islands up to 2035 and for Oahu up to 2040. So it was really baffling in October when the same governor signed the tentative liquid natural gas deal. If this goes forward, this could lock us into fossil fuels until hydrogen or synthetic natural gas becomes available at some unknown time in the future. This path has no proven finish line because the technologies are not in common use yet. So in terms of accountability, the new tentative agreement just kicks the can down the road and says that sustainability is the future's problem, not the present. This is crushingly disappointing. The administration has tried to give us the sense that the new gas proposal would not affect renewable energy efforts in Hawaii. But in fact, liquid natural gas in this context would be used strictly to generate electricity. Solar and wind generate electricity. Therefore, liquid natural gas absolutely does directly threaten and compete for funding and resources with renewable energy. Every penny spent on liquid natural gas will come at the direct expense of clean energy in the near future. Now, in recent articles, it's come to light that the offshore gasification facility that would receive the ships, convert the gas, and pipe it into shore will take at least 6 years and $1.4 billion to complete. Of course, it locks us into carbon fuels for 20 years at least. Even then, we're betting on technologies that have been around the corner for 50 plus years and haven't proven themselves. Meanwhile, big solar installations are a proven technology that takes 12 to 18 months to build. So much for accountability. Let's talk about cost. As you can see in this graph here, liquid natural gas prices are sky high in Hawaii. We pay 2 to 3 times as much as the mainland for all forms of imported energy, but especially natural gas. We pay more than 4 times as much as the mainland. As if that weren't bad enough, the prices themselves are wildly variable by a factor of more than 5 in recent years, and they're bound to increase. I know from seeing these in Southeast Ohio a few years back that fracking wells run dry in just a matter of weeks. We're basically talking about a resource that's down to the dregs. In Hawaii, small-scale solar installations cost slightly less than the rest of the U.S., maybe $2.82 versus $3.03 per watt of panel installed. But Hawaii is sunny, so these installations can deliver anywhere from 20 to 30% more power than in most U.S. states. Unlike all fossil fuels, solar prices have been trending down sharply for many decades, with relatively little volatility. Rather than changing by a factor of 5 or 10, solar prices have come down consistently by a factor of several hundred since the 1970s. And there's every indication that they will continue to follow this trajectory for quite some time because they're shaped by similar forces to those that shaped the computer industry: high demand and highly automated technologies. Also, unlike fossil fuels, you buy solar and wind generating equipment all at once, at a fixed rate of financing if you're smart about it, and then there are no surprises in your costs going forward for decades. Of course, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, but battery storage is already good enough to handle that, as you'll see in a moment. And as I showed in the previous episode, battery storage is about to get much cheaper and much more reliable. This is not theory. The westernmost of the inhabited islands, Hawai'i, was faced with a financially struggling electric utility in the wake of the very damaging Hurricane Iniki in 1992. So by 2002, the citizens were able to raise money and found a cooperative to buy out the utility, and the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative has provided energy for the island ever since. Now, in 2008, the cooperative set the very ambitious goal of getting to 50% clean energy by 2023. And by 2019, they'd actually achieved that. And along the way, they were a major pioneer in combined solar generation and battery storage, as skillfully reported in Canary Media. See the links in the description below. From 2021 to now, they've enjoyed the lowest electric power prices in Hawaii. All right, so clearly solar and wind energy can and do win when it comes to the environment, accountability, and cost. What about security? Here are the inhabited Hawaiian Islands, and here's how far they are from everywhere else. If you look in that little box, you can see these little dots, and that's the islands that I just showed you. So we really are amazingly far away from almost everywhere else on Earth. And for this reason, Hawaii depends on shipping for more than 90% of the goods and much of the energy that it uses. This leaves us vulnerable to events beyond our control. For example, dock strikes in 1949 and 1971 crippled our supply chains for months, causing shortages and many business closures. Our dependence on shipping is arguably Hawaii's greatest weakness. Whether it's with oil or liquid natural gas, we are always just a month or so away from disaster. That's no doubt one reason why our energy prices are so high and why it's so easy to get investment for more imports. By contrast, with solar and wind power, we go from being obligate energy consumers to becoming permanent energy producers. These are long-term productive assets. 25 years after installation, solar panels still produce between 88 and 98% as much as their rated power on day one. That means the window to upgrade solar panels, as well as wind generators and even battery storage, is decades wide. And prices on all of these are already low and dropping fast. According to the Hawaii State Energy Office, as of 2020, we had 5 times as much solar installed per capita as the U.S. average. Solar and wind are our strengths, and playing to our strengths rather than our weaknesses is foundational to any strategy for success in economics or in life. Now, as I mentioned before, there's one clear winner, and it's a clear winner in all 4 of the categories that we've explored. For the environment, solar and wind provide clean energy. Gas is polluting for 20 plus years. Solar and wind are the lowest cost options, and the costs are fixed and decreasing versus high, variable, and increasing. For gas, solar and wind offer the high security of fully owned assets versus the low security of being locked in as an obligate buyer. And for accountability, solar and wind offer a proven path, as we saw in the case of Hawai'i, versus a path that depends on the maturity of an unproven future fuel that has failed to materialize for over 50 years. So with this in mind, let's look at what a renewable energy path for Hawaii might actually look like and see how it all fits together. I got curious to know where all the energy came from, so I looked it up on the U.S. Energy Information Administration's website. Now, I was unfamiliar with some of these terms. I mean, motor, gasoline, and ethanol is pretty clear. Distillates, I wasn't sure what those were used for. Of course, jet fuel, it's pretty amazing how much jet fuel we use. But not too surprising, given that we have a permanent population of only 1.4 million and about 800,000 visitors on average per month. So about 10 million a year. There's other categories, HGL, I didn't know what that was. Residual fuel, no idea. So I looked it up on their website. They were really good about explaining what it all meant. And so I cribbed in a few notes just to make clear what it all is. So our job now is to figure out what we need to move from the fossil fuel bucket into the renewable energy bucket in order to achieve our goal of 100% renewable energy. You can see that while air travel dominates the energy picture, the military is not far behind. Okay, so let's take that first step and convert the fuel that we burn for electricity into renewables and look at how much more generation we need. If we do this, we need 250% more wind, solar, or even geothermal energy than we have today to reach our 100% renewable energy goal. And I think that's actually probably doable even in the 2030 timeframe. Islands like Kauai might even get there in that time frame. But even by 2030, some things are likely to change. We're likely to see a lot more electric vehicles. And by 2035, or the original goal, 2045, the vast majority of vehicles will probably be electric. Then we need to bring the fuel down from cars into electricity. And it really looks like we have to develop a lot of electricity. But this is wrong, because one of the reasons people want to go to electric vehicles is that electric motors are about 5 times more efficient than gasoline engines. They're not wasting nearly as much energy in heat or idling. And so we only need about 340% more renewable energy to cover that need. But we can do even better than this. Right now, Hawaii has an 84% mode share for cars. And in major urban centers where most of the population lives, that's pretty ridiculous. With really good public transit, we should be looking at more of a 42% mode share for cars, meaning that a lot more people are walking from place to place or taking public transit. And with good planning, we should be able to get there in these timeframes. And so that brings us down to a 300% increase. How would that look on the ground? Well, it adds up to about 0.19% of the total land area to cover our electric needs if we have really good transit planning. That's that little tiny pink square that you see on Oahu. And I've just put it there to give you a sense of scale. Let's zoom in and see what that looks like. What you're seeing here is in the dark purple, the clean energy sources all gathered together into one stylized square. And then the additional required resources in pink, again gathered in one square. And it's about the size of the Naval Air Station at Barbers Point. But of course, that's not how the solar resources are distributed. One of the things that's really nice about solar and some wind resources that I'll show you later is that they can be distributed on rooftops and throughout the community much closer to where the resources are used. And so can the storage. So if I kind of schematically represent how the current clean energy resources are distributed, that's these dark purple squares that follow the urban areas of Oahu, then the additional power sources appear in pink. And again, compared to the great urban mass, this is a pretty small fraction of the area. a total of 0.19% overall. And you might wonder, well, what would all of this cost? Well, the levelized cost of energy for solar and wind is a measure of the total cost per megawatt hour of energy delivered throughout the entire life cycle, from purchase through use and disposal at the end of the resource's life. And this number, the levelized cost of energy for solar and wind, including storage, is already lower than any of the fossil fuels, according to Lazarda.com. See the links in the description below for their original report. And remember, these are mainland prices. Hawaii pays at least twice as much and up to 4 times as much for all forms of imported energy than the mainland does. But for renewables, Hawaii is the 5th best state for solar and the 3rd best state for wind, which means that we already have a lot of local installation experience on the ground. Hawaii's renewable production costs are slightly lower than the mainland and are likely to keep dropping over time. The fossil fuel prices it competes with are already high and are likely to only get higher in the long run. So what I did was take the levelized cost of energy for solar and wind from the Lazard.com report, plug it into what we would need, and I came up with $47 per person per month for power generation. Now, that's not the price you're going to see on the electric meter. This includes buildings. That's not just your home, but it's also supermarkets, warehouses, and local service industries when they pay their utility bills. And it includes charging for all vehicles and the energy used in public transit. But can we do even better than this? Yes, according to the Hawaii State Energy Office, every dollar spent on energy efficiency in Hawaii will save us $15 in energy generation. Now, if you're new to the channel, you probably expect me to start scolding you about recycling and other personal choices, but that's not where the leverage lies. One of the big insights from the early days of Edenicity is that our biggest leverage is in our city planning, particularly urbanist design, which is all about making cities much more livable. By making neighborhoods multifamily, meaning apartments rather than detached houses that tend to make everything sprawl, mixed use so that everything's within walking distance, and transit-oriented so that people can use mass transit, which is up to 25 times more energy efficient than gasoline-powered cars and up to 5 times more efficient than electric-powered cars. So can you see that just good planning practices dramatically reduce transportation and utility costs, and they also have many health and safety benefits. The opportunity to put these principles into action is all around us. As large areas of Hawaii's cities age out and go vacant as they become uneconomical to maintain, good urbanism can revitalize them to provide many decades of lower energy consumption, high convenience lifestyles. And these can be great places to live as long as we make sure to build into them lots of affordable mixed-income housing. If you're interested in learning more about that, I've prepared a Edenicity land use concept which showcases these ideas in fairly abstract terms so they can be adapted to different cities. See the link in the description for that. Here's what our energy consumption would look like on the Edenicity plan. Now we need just 52% more renewables, and on the island of Oahu, this would be a very modest increase to what we already have. Seen here in a block or distributed on the island, this is what's already there, and this is how much additional capacity would need to be brought on, which is kind of amazing when you think of it. We are already almost there if we just add good planning. There's not many states that can say this, by the way. Now, if you're curious about the cost, this would work out to $23 per person per month, again, divided among all the buildings that you encounter in the course of your daily life, as well as the energy used in transit. Needless to say, this would be a very affordable lifestyle for all of us. Okay, how can Hawaii get back on track with energy? Well, the most important thing is to forget liquid natural gas and go all in with renewables and integrated battery storage. Second, we should absolutely focus on the financial roadblock, but solve it financially, not through unproven dirty technology. The financial solution to this would be a buyout by a state or cooperative entity, just like they did on Kauai. Along the way, we should aggressively plan for energy efficiency through excellent urbanism. This would look like all-electric transit-oriented development, as well as proven innovations such as seawater district air conditioning as they have in downtown Honolulu today. We should also increase rooftop energy production, going from the 36% installed today to maybe as much as 72%, and consider adding wind power to buildings. Now, I know this is an unusual approach to wind, but it has many environmental advantages. Large wind farms can be very harmful to migrating birds, but new technologies such as this one by Aeromine, and no, I'm not being paid to endorse them, sit atop flat-roofed industrial buildings and use an airfoil to create a low-pressure zone that draws air up and through a small propeller at the base of the unit. The propeller is much smaller and quieter, much easier to service than a large wind generator, and much less exposed to wildlife. And also, because of their small size, I believe you could screen them as well, bringing the number of bird strikes to basically zero. The company claims that an installation like this can double the energy output of a solar roof on the same structure. And I like wind in addition to solar on the same footprint because your peak wind situations don't necessarily coincide with your peak sun situations. So the two can complement each other in terms of energy delivery and slightly reduce the amount of battery storage required. And finally, we can look for opportunities to stack functions. This is a permaculture concept borrowed from ecology, where each design element performs several functions, and put municipal solar and maybe even wind power over transit hubs, bikeways, and agricultural production. I know from being a market gardener for several years that many of the greens do better when they're partly or mostly shaded through the hottest hours of the day. And this can be arranged through placement under solar panels. Does all of this solve the problem of overall energy use? Well, obviously, when you look at this picture, it does not. In Hawaii, we still have enormous amounts of energy used by air travel and the military. So in my next episode, we'll take a deep dive on what to do about those. Thanks as always to the wonderful patrons for supporting this work. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't already, check out these publications in the description and this awesome video above. Take care, stay green, see you next time.